There were 187,000 constructed. Nearly none made it out alive. Almost no one has ever adequately explained why. Consider Britain in 1957. Every morning, milk was brought right to your door. Your weekly box was filled out by the neighborhood grocer. Before 8 o'clock, builders arrived in their vans at terraced homes. Before the town woke up, corner stores received their inventory. Vans powered the working, breathing, delivering world of everyday British life. And for almost 10 years, the Ford Thames 400E, a boxy, unassuming, subtly excellent vehicle, ran more of that world than virtually any other. It was used by Whitbread brewers. Currys made use of it. Every morning, Weetabix loaded it. It was trusted with deliveries by the Rank organization. Then, in a calm August of 1965, production came to an end. There is no farewell event. No farewell. No final version. It just came to an end. And after a few years, these vehicles started to disappear from British highways one by one, exhausted from the extremely demanding tasks for which they were designed. They had virtually disappeared by 1980. These days, you are more likely to see one at a museum than on the street. What then took place? What is the true tale of the van that produced and catered to a generation before going missing without a trace? The answers are far more unexpected than you might anticipate, so persevere. You had to go back to the mid-1950s to see how far behind Ford of Britain had slipped in order to comprehend the significance of the 400E. The Ford Sun E83W was their sole light commercial van at the time. The engine was a side valve with front and rear transverse leaf springs. Lower gears do not have a synchromesh. Additionally, it was created in 1938. Read that again, 1938. In the year when the Second World War had not even begun, Ford was still selling vans while Britain was recovering from the war, the NHS was being established, and television sets were starting to appear in living rooms all over the nation. Bedford and other rivals had already made progress. When it was introduced in 1952, the Bedford CA rocked the market. Ford were aware of their predicament. The next thing they did was amazing. Dagenham's engineers made a seemingly straightforward choice that had a profound impact. They pushed the driver forward, immediately over the front wheels, and stowed the engine between the two front seats rather than positioning it at the front beneath a conventional bonnet, as was the case with nearly every van previously constructed. This is referred to as a forward control layout by engineers. In actuality, this meant that an automobile that took up no more road length than a large family car could suddenly accommodate 180 cubic feet of load space. For a moment, picture that. A builder could park in the same spot as an Austin Cambridge and then get out to load a van that could fit everything in a tiny room. The 400E was truly modern because of that one design decision, the driver ahead and the engine below and between the seats. It had nothing to do with style. It was unadulterated, pragmatic thinking for the benefit of the working man. However, the majority of individuals are unaware of this. This brand new business van's engine was taken straight from a typical family car. Families all around Britain drove the Ford Consul, which had a 1,703 cubic centimeter engine, to Sunday lunch and the beach. Ford installed that exact same unit into the 400E after gently detuning it for the long, steady task of commercial driving. The end product was a van engine that was significantly more potent than what competitors were installing in cars of this class. In practical terms, that meant that the 400E continued to drive even when the van was completely laden, the road was steep, the weather was bad, and the schedule was tight. That was a big deal to the delivery drivers and tradespeople who depended on these trucks on a daily basis. That was all. Now, and this is the part of the narrative that most surprises people, by the early 1960s, doormobile was one of the most cherished terms in the language of British families. You are familiar with the meaning of that word if you were raised at that time. A trip for the weekend. A bed that folds up. A little cooker. The scent of morning dew and canvas. The original British campervan, known as the doormobile, allowed regular families to go whenever and wherever they pleased while carrying all they required. The doormobile was the epitome of British vacation adventure before the Volkswagen camper became a cultural symbol. The Ford Thames 400E was the foundation of the original doormobile, the car that provided all of that freedom, yet nearly no one still recalls this. Martin Walter of Folkestone, a coach builder with roots dating back to 1773 when they manufactured horse harnesses, was the company responsible for the modification. Their doormobile adaptations on the 400E were so well liked by the early 1960s that the term doormobile essentially took the role of campervan in common British English. The 400E's independent chassis construction allowed coach builders to do nearly anything with the rear section, in contrast to competitors who employed welded unibody designs. This is why the 400E functioned so well as a basis. Lift the roof. Include fold-out beds. Install an icebox and a cooker. Britain's campervan culture was not intended to be introduced by the 400E. It just so happened to be the perfect car at the perfect time. Then there is a tale that has nothing to do with builders, bros, or campervans. A man named Brian Epstein bought a cream-colored Ford Thames 400E express bus with registration number 6834KD in the summer of 1962 from Terry Doran, a Liverpool auto salesman. Epstein was the manager of a young Liverpool band that had the potential to transform the world. The Beatles. During some of the most significant months of the band's whole history, the van, a Ford Thames 400E, the same boxy, useful vehicle employed by Weetabix and Whitbread, became their traveling workhorse. Sitting in the back of a Ford Thames 400E, John, Paul, George, and Ringo formed the Beatles as they travelled throughout England between performances. Mal Evans, the band's roadie, is said to have driven that exact van through freezing fog on the way back to Liverpool in January 1963, during one of the harshest winters Britain had seen in decades. The windscreen cracked after a pebble hit it. With 4 young lads in the rear who would go on to become the world's most well-known musicians, Evans continued driving through the night with the chilly air pouring in. A Ford Thames 400E is no longer merely a van once you realize this. To be honest, this car was quite versatile. The 400E was transformed into nearly whatever working Britain required by Ford and independent coach builders. Conversions of ambulances occurred. Tenders for fire. Mobile stores that extended their sides to cater to street patrons. The cab door of ice cream vans with specially insulated bodies is louvered to allow ventilation for the refrigeration apparatus. Tower wagons for streetlight maintenance. One of the most peculiar commercial vehicles ever produced in Britain was the power truck. A separate diesel engine was installed behind the cab of the power truck. That engine powered the car's back wheels and an industrial air compressor at the same time. The van's typical underfloor engine was completely removed. The same motor powered both the van and the compressor. It was so distinct from a typical 400E that it had its own name badge across the front, with the term power truck instead of Thames. That's the kind of inventive, useful creativity that made this van possible. What caused it to vanish, then? This is the point at which the narrative becomes truly intriguing and challenging. Ford had an issue by the early 1960s that was unrelated to the van's quality. Under the same American ownership, Ford of Britain and Ford of Germany were 2 very different businesses. Additionally, both businesses were directly competing with one another by selling their own vans throughout Europe, including in France, Belgium, and Scandinavia. On the same streets, a German Taunus Transit and a British Thames 400E, both embodying the essence of the Ford brand, were vying for the same consumer. According to reports, the parent business in Detroit realized how ridiculous it was. For the first time, British and German engineers collaborated to create a single pan-European van in 1963 under a project known internally as Project Redcap. In 1961, the 400E's manufacture was transferred from Dagenham to a new facility at Langley, close to Slough, freeing up space at Dagenham for the new Ford Cortina assembly line, among other things. And Project Redcap produced its outcome in October 1965. It's known as the Ford Transit. Larger and more spacious. front-powered, constructed for Britain's impending transition to the highway era. Beside it, the 400E, which had been truly groundbreaking in 1957, appeared cramped, warm, and narrow. Later, drivers of the Transit expressed relief in not having to endure the heat and noise that came from sitting directly over the engine in the previous forward control configuration. The 400E did not have a send-off. August 1965 saw the end of production, and Britain moved on. After more than 60 years, what remains is something profound and subdued. Britain's craftsmen were kept employed by the Ford Thames 400E. A generation of family holidays began with it. It helped the Beatles survive the bitterly cold winters of their early years. It was the cornerstone of the campervan culture in Britain. From one end of the nation to the other, it transported electrical items, beer, and breakfast cereal to villages and cities. It was never glitzy. It never made an effort to be. It just arrived each morning and completed the task. And maybe that's exactly why it should be remembered. The things that keep the world functioning quietly are frequently the first things we forget. Have you ever taken a Ford Thames 400E ride? Perhaps a family friend transformed one into a doormobile for the summer, or perhaps your father drove one for business. Please share any memories you may have of these vans in the comments section below. The stories that history books seldom care to document are carried by the humans who actually coexisted with these machines. And if this made you think of a Britain that should be remembered, share it with someone who would find value in it as well.